Exposed. The sinister legacy of incest in Appalachia, 3 generations of cursed women without eyes. Ruth stumbled through the cracked door of their family home, letting out a shaky breath. The wind howled like a banshee outside, rattling the sagging porch and sending shudders down her spine. The words her mother used to whisper, "The curse will come for you too," echoed in her mind. Her heart raced as she turned to find Ellie, her precious 8-year-old daughter, snuggled under the tattered quilt, oblivious to the dark legacy that loomed over them. Each night, Ruth worked the late shift at the diner, where the fluorescent lights flickered like her dwindling hopes. The chatter of the regulars masked the chilling truth that gnawed at her. Whispers of her lineage haunted her like tainted shadows. She was a single mother, barely scraping by, and the weight of her family's twisted history threatened to crush her. Ruth felt the shadows of her ancestors pressing in on her, their blind eyes staring from beyond the grave. Her phone buzzed one evening, delivering a chill that made her skin crawl. Anonymous messages arrived, hinting at terrible truths lurking beneath the surface of her town. "You're not safe, Ruth. They're coming." The words twisted in her stomach like a knife, fueling the paranoia seeping into her bones. Every laugh in the dark, every familiar face felt tainted now. Who could she trust? Ruth quickened her pace as she walked home. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms at her side. She turned a corner, and there he was, the figure that had been following her. Tall, cloaked in darkness, blending seamlessly into the shadows. Ruth's breath hitched. He was a predator and she was his prey. Panic surged through her. Instinct twisted her gut into knots, urging her to run. But where would she go? The very ground seemed soaked in her family's sins. At the diner, she overheard hushed conversations about the sheriff, a man she once perceived as a guardian of justice. Now, rumors painted him as a protector of secrets, intertwining with the horror that plagued her lineage. Her heart raced as she realized he was at the center of it all. "He knows," she murmured under her breath, fear creeping into her veins. What if he was the malevolent force that had kept her family shackled in madness? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. Ruth's breath came in shallow bursts as she approached the final stretch home. The figure loomed closer, and she felt the suffocating grip of fear. Panic clawed at her insides. Memories flooded back her mother's desperate warnings, the stories of the eyes that once saw the truth. As she pushed open the door, icy dread flooded in and she slammed it shut behind her. They were coming for Ellie. Ruth's thoughts raced as she scanned the narrow hallway, the shadows growing thicker, curling around her like a serpent. There, in her child's room, laughter bubbled from Ellie, unaware of the storm brewing outside. But Ruth couldn't shake the feeling that the evil creeping closer wasn't just a curse. It was alive, and might just be waiting for its moment to strike. Would she unlock the secrets of her family's legacy in time to protect her daughter? Or was destiny set to blind them both to the horrors that lay ahead? Ruth's heart slammed against her ribcage, a prisoner in her own body as she stepped toward Ellie's room. She had to muster all her courage, but terror gnawed at her thoughts. The laughter kept bubbling up, sweet and innocent, like a bubble refusing to pop. But no joy was safe in this house anymore. "Ellie," Ruth croaked, straining to keep her voice steady. "Come here, honey." The child's giggles tumbled out, carefree and blissful, a stark contrast to the cold dread sinking into her bones. A moment more, and the laughter froze in place. Ruth's breath caught as she heard scuffling a sound in the darkness. The shadows shifted, crawling over the walls like spiders. Ruth needed to be the protector, the shield against whatever lurked outside, whatever had haunted her family for generations. She tiptoed toward the soft glow spilling from Ellie's room. Each step felt like a step deeper into a pit of dread. As if unseen eyes were judging her. A flicker of movement caught her attention. The curtain swayed, though there was no breeze. Chills raced along her spine, prickling like tiny needles. "Ellie?" she whispered again, her voice barely a breath. What could a mother say to her child when the world had twisted into a nightmare? Finally, she reached the doorframe, peeping inside. Ellie sat on her bed, her doll clutched tightly in her arms, dark curls framing her tiny face. But Ruth's heart sank. Something was wrong. Ellie's eyes were wide, fixated on the empty corner of the room, as if watching something invisible. "Mommy, it's here." Ellie's words sent a shockwave through Ruth, as if she had just been told a truth too dark to comprehend. The room felt even colder now, a bitter chill that seemed to seep right out of the walls. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Ruth asked, stepping inside. She reached for Ellie, but her daughter shook her head, pointing with a trembling finger into the darkened corner. "Says it wants you, Mommy." The air turned electric, thick with a palpable tension. Ruth felt her stomach twist, as if her very insides were being rearranged in her revulsion. "What do you mean? What does it want?" Before Ellie could reply, the lights flickered. The bulb buzzed ominously. Shadows danced wildly, and for a brief second, Ruth thought she saw a figure, a grotesque shape, something with no discernible form, just an outline that seemed to hang in the air. Searing panic gripped her chest. "Ellie, stay close to me," Ruth rasped, feeling her throat tighten as the space felt oppressive, the air heavy with something unseen. Her instincts screamed that the hauntings of her family were not just memories. They were manifesting in real time. Then the door slammed shut behind her, cutting off any escape. Ruth spun, mouth dry with horror. The darkness felt alive, crawling beneath her skin. They were coming. They had found them. "Mommy!" Ellie screamed, her voice piercing through the haze. Ruth looked at her, panic racing in her veins, desperate to stop whatever foul force was about to strike. "Stay with me, Ellie. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." But the shadow spoke, whisperings her ears couldn't fully grasp, like a chant from a time long forgotten. Ruth clutched her daughter tight, knowing deep inside that the secrets of her family's past were now trapped in this house, a malevolent heritage she could no longer escape. In the corner, where the darkness thickened, a pair of glows flickered to life, two sinister pinpricks that seemed to see everything. Then came a soft voice, unmistakably familiar, slithering through the darkness. "Ruth, it's time to join us." Fear gripped her heart like a vice. With a shudder, she realized facing the darkness meant unearthing truths she'd rather keep buried. Could she face the whispers in the shadows? Or would she and Ellie be swallowed whole by the family curse? And as the figure lurked closer, Ruth braced herself. What did she really know about the darkness waiting just beyond the threshold? Ruth's heart thudded painfully. The voice echoed in her mind, a chilling reminder of lost memories, lost souls, trapped just like she was now. The shadows pulsed, and the air thickened, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. She clutched Ellie, who trembled in her arms, the child's wide eyes mirroring a terror that made Ruth's own pulse quicken. "Please, stay close to me," Ruth whispered, her throat raw. She could almost feel the figure growing bolder, reaching out from the corner, hungry for something dark and unseen. In that moment, it felt as if the very house was watching, alive with sinister intent. "Mommy?" Ellie spoke, her voice quaking. "It's getting colder. Says you have to go with it." The words were like icy fingers curling around Ruth's heart. "No, we're not going anywhere," she snapped, shaking her head fiercely. Her eyes darted to the corner where the shadows writhed. "We'll fight it together. You hear me?" Ellie nodded, her little face pale, but bravery dawning faintly behind her fear. Ruth felt a surge of protective energy. Slowly, the pinpricks of light in the darkness intensified, morphing into something that resembled eyes, a pair that seemed to share an awful connection to Ruth, as if they held her family history against her. In that moment, dread poured down on her like a torrent. "Please," she choked out, a plea hanging heavy in the stifling air. "We didn't mean to disturb you, we only wanted to leave." But the shadows didn't relent, and suddenly the room erupted with an angry howl, a cacophony of voices from the past her ancestors, cursed women who had suffered at the hands of a legacy that tainted them from birth. "Join us, Ruth," the whispers cried. "You cannot escape your blood. Our pain is your birthright." A rush of emotions spiraled through her mind, shame, anger, and terror, the weight of generations bearing down upon her. It was true. Secrets and evils had been whispered within these walls too long. In a desperate act, Ruth yanked Ellie closer, summoning her last reserves of courage. "No, this ends with us," she shouted, her voice slicing through the fog that pressed against them. "We will not succumb. I will protect my daughter." The shadows recoiled slightly, as if taken aback by her declaration. The chilling laughter faded, replaced with a sinister growl that echoed through the air. The lights flickered violently, casting eerie patterns on the walls that seemed to swallow the room whole. "Ah, but you cannot deny your heritage, Ruth.
It chose you.
You are meant to be part of us." The growing shadows split, unveiling a doorway concealed in the dark one that beckoned her with swirling promises of knowledge, power, and an answer to the curse. Ruth's heart raced as she sensed Ellie's grip loosen. "No," Ruth shouted, fear gripping her. "Don't go near that." "Mommy, it feels warm," Ellie murmured, eyes glazing over as if entranced. "Ellie, listen to me," Ruth yelled, shaking her daughter. She couldn't allow that darkness to claim her baby as it had claimed generations before. She had to do something fast, something to break the pull of the dark promise. But the voices grew louder, angry, pleading, inviting. They swelled with certainty, drowning out her will. "Embrace your blood, Ruth," they cried in unison. "Join your past, and we shall grant you what you need." Ruth could feel the darkness pressing in closer, the fear threatening to choke her. What if she couldn't pull Ellie away in time? "Mommy," Ellie's voice trailed, caught between the two worlds with her mother, and that seductive darkness promising freedom from their suffering. And then it hit Ruth: the history that had haunted her family wasn't only about ancient curses. It was about sacrifices made and deals struck in the dark. In that moment, she realized she had one choice left. "Ellie, I'll never leave you. I'd rather die than watch you go. Now, let us show them our strength." Tension coiled tightly around them. The shadows responded violently, swirling like a tempest. Ruth's body steeled as she prepared for the impending storm. What would happen now? Could they fight the darkness together, or had the curse finally come to claim them? As the shadows closed in, Ruth held Ellie closer, awaiting the unimaginable. The shadows roared like a furious beast, their chilling whispers becoming a haunting melody that hung in the air. Ruth's skin prickled, every nerve ending alive with fear. She strained to hold Ellie tight, the little girl now slipping further toward the darkness as if it held her in a trance. "No, no, Ellie, please," she cried, desperation clawing at her throat. From the depths of the shadows, a ghastly figure began to take form, rising from the ground like smoke, solidifying into flesh. Its outline buzzed with energy, and as it loomed closer, Ruth felt a terrible chill seeping through her bones. It was a woman, pale, gaunt, with hollow voids for eyes that seemed to gaze into Ruth's very soul. "Your fear feeds us," the woman's voice echoed, a blend of sorrow and sinister joy. "You must embrace who you are, who we are." Ruth shook her head violently. "No, you're not me. I'm not like you." Each word felt like a knife, slicing through the thick darkness surrounding them. But as the figure stepped closer, she caught glimpses of the past in the shadows that swirled around her, a tapestry of betrayal, despair, and loss. Visions of her ancestors, countless generations twisted by fate, flashed before her eyes. Each face bore the scars of a harrowing legacy. But one face stood out, the face of a young girl, with bright eyes that seemed so innocent yet held deep anguish. "Look at what they've done," the entity hissed, pointing a skeletal finger at Ellie. "They forced us into the dark, and now it's your turn to decide. Are you ready to reclaim our power?" A wave of fury coursed through Ruth. "I'm not afraid of you. I won't let you take her." The words erupted from her mouth, a feral snarl rising to meet the oppressive whispers of the shadows. At that moment, Ellie broke free from Ruth's grip, taking a hesitant step towards the swirling darkness, her small hands reaching out. "Mommy, I want to go. I feel different." Ruth lunged forward, grabbing Ellie just as a flicker of light ignited behind the shadows. It was a soft glow, barely illuminating their surroundings, but enough to drive back the suffocating darkness for just a moment. "No, you have to fight it. Ellie, remember all the stories I told you? You are powerful. You are not just a name on a list of curses." The light flickered again, pulsing like a heartbeat. The figure recoiled, twisting its wiry limbs in agony. "You must give in. Stop fighting." "Ellie," Ruth shouted. "Listen to me, we have a choice. We can break this chain together. We have to be stronger than them." Tears streamed down Ellie's face as she hesitated, torn between the seductive pull of the shadows and the desperate call of her mother. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she whispered, her voice breaking. With all the strength she could muster, Ruth took a step back into the light, pulling her daughter with her. The dark figure screeched, the walls vibrating with its furious energy. "You will pay for your defiance." Suddenly, the light surged forward, illuminating the twisted faces of Ruth's ancestors. Their eyes wide with rage and pain, yet glimmers of hope flickered within them. "Reject the darkness," they cried in unison. Ruth felt heat radiating from her core, igniting her blood with the fire of defiance. "We are not victims. We will not walk the path laid out for us." In that moment, Ruth made her choice. As the walls closed in, she grabbed Ellie's hand. "Hold tight. We will break free." A scream shattered the room as they surged forward, a tidal wave of strength fighting against the darkness. The echoes of her ancestors rang loud, igniting the air with power as they battled against the very fabric of their wretched lineage. But as they plunged deeper into the suffocating shadow, a chilling realization struck Ruth. Would their defiance be enough to unravel generations of torment? Or had they only awakened the true monster lurking within their bloodline? The shadows twisted and churned, ready for the final confrontation. As the remnants of Ruth's ancestors shrieked in despair, and a new, horrifying presence emerged from the abyss, hungry for vengeance. The darkness surged forward, a monstrous tide seeking to swallow them whole. Ruth felt the suffocating weight of dread, the ancient dread that had been buried deep in her family's history, clawing its way back to the surface. She gripped Ellie's hand tighter, her heart racing like a drum, their pulse synchronizing in fear. "Mommy," its Ellie's voice cracked as the shadows flickered around them, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. "I know, sweetie. Just keep your eyes on me." Ruth's voice trembled, but she forced strength into her tone, an ember of hope igniting against the encroaching night. The howling of the shadowy figure grew louder, a piercing shriek that threatened to split their very beings. "You think you can escape our legacy? You have bound yourself to the darkness from which you came." It lunged toward them, ethereal and terrifying, but the light surged again, momentarily blinding them. "Don't let go, Ellie," Ruth shouted, her chest tightening in panic. The walls around them twisted in agony, the air thick with a rotten stench, a miasma of despair that clawed at their senses. With a heavy exhale, a desperate thought struck Ruth. What if we fight back together? A surge of hope ignited in her chest, warping the shadows around them as she channeled everything she had into her voice. "Look inside, Ellie. Remember who you are." For a second, Ellie looked uncertain, her bright eyes glistening with fear. "I'm scared, Mommy. What if I'm no?" Ruth interrupted, clutching Ellie's shoulders firmly. "You are stronger. You're not just their blood. You carry our strength. We fought them before, and we will do it again." The shadows shrieked, and the figure writhed, as though Ruth's words cut through it like a blade. She pressed on. "You feel it? The light pressing against us. We have to push back. You're not alone. Don't let it take you." Ruth could feel Ellie's resolve beginning to resurface. In the grip of terror, a flicker of defiance ignited in her daughter's eyes, a spark that lit up the surrounding darkness. "Okay, Mommy, I want to fight. Yes, just like this," Ruth shouted, as she focused all her energy on the light blossoming from within them. Together, they summoned all their strength, their fears melding into a blaze of luminous defiance. As the glow grew brighter, the figure howled, its voice weaving into a cacophony of rage as it sought to push them down, to smother their rebellion. Suddenly, a rush of memories clamored in Ruth's mind, all the whispered secrets of her forebears, tales of their struggles and fights, dark revelations of a history riddled with horror, her heart wrenched with understanding. They had been bound to a cycle of pain and ruin, terrified to break free. With every ounce of her spirit, Ruth shouted, "I am not defined by this legacy. I will not let you control us." Light burst forth like a comet, igniting everything in its path. The shadows screamed, fragmented under the force of their united front. But just as victory seemed within grasp, a clawed shadow darted to the side, reaching for Ellie. "Mommy!" Ellie cried, and panic knotted Ruth's stomach in a split second of horror. Ruth's connection to the light flickered, barely tethered as she faced the horror of losing Ellie. "Get back!" she screamed, lunging for her daughter. Would this final battle push them over the edge? The light pulsed again, but not from Ruth. She turned, eyes wide with shock. There, amidst the swirling shadows, she saw the young girl's face from the depths of her memory, illuminated by an otherworldly glow. "Mommy, it's me," the child echoed, and those hollow eyes sparkled with resolve. "I'm here to help." The realization sent a shiver through Ruth. Could this child, lost to shadows, finally guide them toward liberation? But the darkness refused to relent. It surged around them, angry and aggressive. As the shadowy figure bellowed, "You will never escape. You cannot change who you are." As they fought, the walls began to warp around them, a vortex spiraling deeper into the nightmare, and Ruth's heart raced with dread. Would they sink further into this abyss, or could they summon the ancestors that lingered just beyond reach? Now, with hope teetering on a knife's edge, Ruth understood the true fight was just beginning. How far would she go to save them both? The darkness pulsed again, and with it, a new monster lurked at the forefront of the shadows. A name echoed in her mind, a name steeped in blood and betrayal, one she never wanted to acknowledge. As reality blurred, Ruth screamed into the terror, her voice swallowed by the dark, "Ellie, hold on tight. We're not done yet." But as the darkness closed in, one chilling question lingered in the air. Were they already too late? The shadows roared, shrieking indignation as the light flickered, a thin membrane between them and utter darkness. Ruth felt it, the pressure of despair tightening around her throat like a noose. "Stay with me, Ellie," she gasped, the urgency heavy in her voice. The looming figure pulsated, its shape twisting, transforming into a form more monstrous, more recognizable. "Mommy!" Ellie screamed, voice raw. "What is it?" "Just keep fighting," Ruth shouted, forcing a fierce composure she didn't feel. But as the shadow recoiled from their light, another horror emerged, faces stretching from the dark. Women straining against the void, mouths gaping in silent screams, stripped of sight and sound. Their eyes were gone, empty sockets that sighed forth sorrow and despair. "No," Ruth whispered, suddenly cold. Memories flooded back, not her own, but echoes of past generations, women who had borne the brunt of this curse. Their whispered names hung in the air, dreadful and familiar. The shadowy form twisted again, and in its depths, Ruth saw the face of a woman her own mother had spoken of, grim tales woven into the fabric of dusty nights. They tried to resist, whispered the seductive voice of the darkness, wrapping around them like a corrupt blanket. "Look what became of them. Will you sacrifice your child, too?" Ruth's heart crashed against her ribs. "No," she cried, pouring her fury into the light that burst forth once more, brilliant yet tenuous. Sparks of remembrance danced around them, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, strong women who had faded but never forgotten. "It's okay, Mommy," Ellie said softly, a fragile smile breaking through her fear. "I can see them, too. They're reaching out." The figures shifted, despair giving way to something almost luminous. Ruth could feel warmth radiating from Ellie, her daughter illuminated by the strength of the generations before them. "Ellie, you're so brave." Nodding firmly, Ellie squeezed her mother's hand. Together, with that single word, defiance fused their wills, creating a beam of pure light slicing through the encroaching dark. The twisted figures recoiled, yet one slithered forward, pushing deeper into their connection, a maddening scream escaping its lipless mouth. "No, you cannot escape." As it writhed, its shape morphed into a twisted reflection of Ruth, a version laden with regret, failure, and despair. Panic flooded Ruth. "You're not me," she screamed, her pulse racing as she faced her own shadows, the fears of inadequacy, the legacy of pain. "You have no power here." But the figure only smiled, a wicked, hollow grin. "You share my blood. We are one in the dark. I am your truth. I am not defined by you." Ruth fought back, her voice a roar, drowning out the rising chaos. "I am my ancestors' strength." The light pulsed again, and the empty women began to shimmer, their forms shifting between agony and hope. "Help us," they cried in unison, voices merging in a haunting harmony. The shadows writhed, angry, wild. "You cannot save them. You cannot save yourself." A moment's hesitation hung in the air. Ruth felt a pang of doubt, but Ellie's grip tightened. "Mommy, don't listen." Just then, a deafening crash erupted, reverberating through the walls as if the very structure screamed against the weight of their fight. In a shattering moment, shadows splintered, and their claustrophobic prison began to crack, revealing not an escape, but a deeper void, a pit of swirling darkness that promised nothing but despair. "Jump!" Ruth shouted, feeling the urge pull her toward the abyss. But deep down, she knew this was where the curse was born, the raw source they resisted. "Mommy!" Ellie's voice broke, and it plunged Ruth back to the surreal moment. Could they go back? Could they destroy this darkness? As tendrils of shadow wrapped tighter, wrapping cold fingers around their ankles, another truth settled firmly in Ruth's mind. "We cannot let it take us," she yelled, igniting a surge of energy as the light flickered one last time. "We will dive deep right into our legacy." And with that, the world twisted, the floor beneath them crumbled, and Ruth grabbed Ellie, plunging headfirst into the dark void. But as they fell, a chilling thought lurked behind Ruth's resolve. Was this their moment of salvation, or simply the beginning of a worse nightmare? They plummeted into the void, engulfed in unrelenting darkness. A cold void pushed against them, stealing warmth, shoving a thick gloom into their lungs. Ruth felt Ellie slip in her grasp, panic clawing up her throat. She tightened her hold, pulling her daughter closer, but the shadows were relentless, swirling around them like hungry wolves. "Mommy, I can't see," Ellie screamed, her voice laced with terror. Anguish stabbed through Ruth like ice. The darkness was tightening, squeezing every ounce of courage from her grasp. "Hold on. I want to let go," Ruth shouted, forcing each word through clenched teeth. Panic surged within her, but also a flicker of rage. They were not alone in this dysfunctional darkness. The echoes of women who came before them screamed of pain and betrayal. This legacy of hurt didn't own them, not now, not ever. The wind rushed around them, howling in a language of despair. Suddenly, they landed with a bone-jarring thud on a hard surface. Ruth's breath escaped in a gasp as she blinked against the oppressive dark. Where were they? The ground felt warped, uneven, and cold against her fingertips. "What is this place?" Ellie whimpered, her voice trembling. Ruth pushed herself up, glancing around. Shapes flickered in the distance, twisted forms grasping at shadows, their silent screams piercing the stillness. Eyes hollow and mournful stared at them. As if summoned, the figure from before emerged from the darkness. It loomed above them, more grotesque than before. 1,000 mouths opened, wailing a cacophony that rattled Ruth's bones. "You thought you could escape? You belong here." "No," Ruth shouted back, feeling an unbearable weight press against her chest. "We refuse your curse." With each word, the air around them crackled. The ground beneath their feet pulsed, trembling in response to her defiance. Ellie trembled beside her, but there was something fierce in her little voice. "Together, Mommy. We are stronger together." In that moment, Ruth realized the truth: their bond was the weapon. They were the legacies of struggle, of survival, and even though they stood on the edge of despair, they also held the light of rebellion. "All right, Ellie, let us find our strength," Ruth yelled, raising their intertwined hands, drawing on the warmth of their love, igniting a spark that flickered against the darkness. With a slow, deliberate breath, Ruth summoned every ounce of her ancestral power. She poured it into the light, which surged from Ellie like sun rays breaking through a storm. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the light expanded around them, casting dreadful shadows that writhed and twisted. The wailing intensified, and shadows fought back, curling around their ankles, climbing higher. "You cannot resist your fate. It is in your blood." Ruth felt her courage start to falter as despair wrapped around her heart. The faces of those women, they were suffocating her, their lost hopes filling the air like cloying smoke. Were they doomed to repeat the cycle forever? "Mommy, look," Ellie pointed, terror blossoming in her eyes. Ruth followed her finger, gasping as she saw a blinding figure emerging from within the depths. A woman, radiant and powerful, came forward amidst the shadows. It was her grandmother, or perhaps another ancestor. The figure's face was serene, eyes aglow with determination. "Ruth, listen." The voice echoed with urgency. "You must confront them. Only then can you set us free." "Free? But how?" Ruth cried, feeling the weight of this legacy tugging her back. "There is power in the truth," her grandmother urged, stepping closer, her iridescent form lighting the space around them. "You must face the curse. Embrace it, but do not let it define you." The shadows surged upwards, obliterating the flicker of hope like a violent storm. Ruth's heart thundered inside her chest. Could they truly stand against this? What would it mean to embrace their curse without being owned by it? Taking a deep breath, Ruth clutched Ellie's hand tighter. "We face this together." But before they could move, a haunting laugh echoed around them, filling every crevice of the darkness. "You will never escape the sins of your blood." As shadows lunged, their grasp tightening like a vice, Ruth braced for impact. How far back could they go? Would diving deep into the darkness lead them to salvation, or was it just a more horrific trap? They charged into the tide of shadows, screaming defiantly, hearts pounding. But the abyss held its breath, waiting to swallow them whole. And then silence fell. Would the truth really set them free? Or had they just traded one curse for another? The silence was a suffocating blanket, pressing against their skin, heavier than the darkness itself. Ruth could barely hear her own heartbeat, muffled, distorted. It felt like they had crossed into a terrifying limbo, caught between the writhing shadows and the shimmering light of her grandmother's power. Ellie clutched her hand tighter, her small fingers trembling, grounding Ruth in this flickering moment of dread. "What do we do now?" Ellie whispered, her voice barely breaking through the thick air. "We trust in each other," Ruth said, though her heart sank at the uncertainty. The darkness was not finished with them. It waited, fanged and licking its wounds, as if savoring the moment before the next attack. Suddenly, the shadows thickened, swirling aggressively, like a storm building in chaos. Ruth felt the icy fingers curl around her throat, squeezing, cutting off her breath. Faces emerged within the shadows, contorted in suffering. They were the faces of her ancestors, eyes hollow, mouths opening in silent screams. Ruth recoiled, but there was something familiar about their pain. It tugged at her heart like a haunting melody. "Mommy, I can feel them," Ellie cried, her voice breaking. "It hurts. They want us to join them." "No," Ruth shouted, pulling her daughter closer. She focused on the warmth of Ellie, the strength of their bond, fighting against the cold despair wrapping around them. They wanted something else. They never wanted us to be trapped in this. With newfound determination, Ruth forced herself to stand tall. "You're right. We will not become part of your suffering." She screamed at the shadows, her voice slicing through the suffocating silence. The shadows recoiled again, hissing with rage, the cacophony of wails growing louder, echoing around them like a sinister symphony. "Defiance will only deepen your damnation," they screeched, and Ruth felt the air vibrate with their fury. Desperation surged within her. She thought of her grandmother's words, the truth buried within the curse. "What do we need to see? What truth cannot be faced?" Ruth whispered, almost to herself as if in response. The ground beneath them shifted, revealing glimpses of their lineage, moments suspended in time. A woman with her hands tied, a candlelight vigil, a girl in a darkened room surrounded by whispers of shame. Faces blurred, histories overlapping, each visage a layer of anguish spilled over generations. "No more," Ruth shouted, tears streaming down her face. "We will not suffer in silence." Suddenly, the blinding figure of her grandmother appeared again, luminous against the oppressive dark. "You must confront the truth," she urged, her voice now a guiding light piercing through the pain. "Tell their stories, Ruth. Make them known. Only then can you shatter the shadows." Ruth realized in that instant. The stories, the memories, they were the chains binding them to this darkness. She tightened her grip on Ellie. "Together we will remember. Together we will make the past our strength." They shouted out names, their voices rising in unison. Sarah, Clara, Letitia. Each name was a knife, cutting through the shadows, piercing the silence that had choked them for centuries. They were reclaiming what had been stolen: identity, dignity, power. The shadows screamed in fury, thrashing violently as light poured from their voices, illuminating the chamber with warmth and rage. But, just as victory began to seem within their reach, a burst of darkness slammed into them, violently snatching the breath from their lungs. Ruth felt Ellie slipping, falling away, lost in a wave of dread that threatened to swallow her whole. "Ellie!" Ruth screamed, reaching out, but the shadows were too strong, wrapping around her daughter like barbed wire. Ruth watched helplessly as Ellie was dragged backward into the void, her little face twisted in fear. "Mommy! Don't let go! No! I won't let you take her!" Ruth bellowed, a primal instinct igniting inside her as she fought against the powerful pull of darkness. The space around her twisted and blurred, shadows laughing menacingly. "You cannot win. You belong to us. You must pay for their sins." The truth loomed, pulsating dangerously close. What would she have to sacrifice to save Ellie? The certainty of the shadows gripped her tightly. Could she really face the horrors that lay ahead? Ruth's resolve hardened like steel. "I will face the darkness. I will face the curse," she roared, knowing there was no turning back now. But as the shadows expanded, ready to reclaim their prize, she could only wonder. What did it truly mean to confront the sins of her ancestors? Would she lose everything to uncover a truth that might destroy them both? The answer waited just beyond the veil of darkness, lurking with a malevolent intent. The darkness came alive, swirling with a surge of malevolent energy. Shadows coiled like snakes, each one whispering twisted tales of regret, betrayal, and sorrow. Ruth fought against the shadows enveloping her, trying to keep her eyes on Ellie, the light of her life now fading into the grotesque abyss. "Ellie!" Ruth cried again, her voice cracking under the weight of despair. If she didn't act, if she didn't reclaim her daughter now, she might lose her forever. The thought seared into her heart, a raw nerve exposed to an unrelenting storm. Ruth felt a surge of adrenaline pulsing through her veins. She was not just the embodiment of her ancestors' pain. She was the future. "You are stronger than this," Ruth shouted, her heart a frantic drum in her chest. "You are light. You were meant to shine." The icy grip of the shadows stumbled, wavering at her words. Desperate, she squeezed her eyes shut, recalling her grandmother's voice. "Shatter the silence, Ruth. Speak their truths." She took a deep breath, opening her eyes to the chaotic dance of darkness. "I will not be silent," she roared, her voice echoing through the void. "I reclaim our stories. I reclaim our names." With every name she spoke, the chamber grew brighter. Adelaide, Marjorie, Jessamine. Each syllable burst forth with the force of ancient grief, igniting the air around her like fireworks. The shadows writhed, howling in agony as their grip weakened. But a sinister laugh erupted from the depths, drowning out her voice. Your defiance only deepens your torment. It hissed, and the shadows lunged again, claws bared, hungry for silence. Ruth could feel their cold breath against her skin, suffocating, churning her stomach. Ellie! Ruth's voice morphed into a primal scream, a raw invocation. She refused to let her daughter fade into the darkness. I will save you, my love. I promise. The shadows recoiled, momentarily stunned. Ruth seized the chance, reaching into the swirling void where she last saw her daughter. The darkness pulsed around her, thick and clinging, but she would not let fear orchestrate their fate. Suddenly, a glimmer of hope pierced through the dark. A small hand reached back toward her, a hand drenched in light, shimmering like sunbeams breaking through rain clouds. Mommy, I'm scared. Ellie's cry reverberated, her voice fragile against the malevolence. Hold on. I'm coming. Ruth's resolve fortified as she propelled herself forward, cutting through the shadows with sheer will. Together, Ellie, will break free. The shadows shrieked, their chorus of anguish escalating, the overlapping cries of her ancestors rising in a furious tempest. Suffer with us, they howled, a cacophony of woe. The very air vibrated, pulling Ruth in multiple directions, as if the darkness sought to swallow her whole. And those chaotic moments, Ruth's mind raced. What price must she pay? The lingering question gnawed at her like a bitter truth. To unearth the sins of her past, would she have to embrace them? Accept the horror that lived within her lineage? Face it, her grandmother's voice reverberated, surging through her. Use it. With no time to waste, Ruth dug deep into her memory, gathering the weight of each story her ancestors bore. I see you, she screamed, the fierce light around her growing brighter. I acknowledge your pain. I understand your suffering, but we will not be bound by it. The shadows twisted and churned, the faces of her ancestors morphing into an eerie mosaic of rage and sorrow. But Ruth stood firm, spiraling into a rage of her own. I will honor you by breaking this curse. We will not fade. Suddenly, the darkness recoiled, a violent convulsion signaling the surge of light fighting against it. It was a moment of breathtaking clarity. She could feel Ellie's warmth and terror entangled with her own. We'll do this together, Ruth said, radiant with determination. I am the crescendo of defiance. The shadows collapsed with an earth-shattering wail, and Ruth reached out, grasping for Ellie's hand. An electric spark surged between them, binding mother and daughter together against the encroaching dark. But as the shadows rippled, swirling back to form a sharper, darker threat, the sinister laugh echoed once more. You cannot escape your blood. Your legacy will find you again. Ruth froze, her heart pounding as chilling uncertainty washed over her. What horrors awaited them now? Would the truth of her lineage chase them into a deeper nightmare? The shadows lurked, waiting for just the right moment to strike, whispering secrets that slithered into her mind, a treacherous foretelling of the storm still to come. The shadows roared, a cacophony of anguish and rage clawing at Ruth's sanity. She stood there, heart pounding like a war drum, the weight of generations resting on her shoulders. It felt as though 1,000 voices echoed in her mind, saturating her thoughts with their stories. They were stories drenched in blood, despair, and betrayal, yet also hope, unquenched hope that pulsed through the very fibers of her being. This was not just a battle for survival, it was a reckoning. Ellie, Ruth shouted, clutching her daughter's hand tighter than ever, feeling Ellie's warmth pulse with her own racing heart. We will turn this darkness inside out. We will rewrite our legacy. The shadows shrank back, momentarily stunned by the fierce bond between them. The whispers receded, replaced by a stillness that hummed with potential. Ruth looked deep into the swirling dark, grounding herself. Memories rushed forward, her ancestors standing strong against oppression, their faces painted with strength and defiance. They fought not just for existence, but for freedom, for the right to be seen, to be heard. Together, we are unstoppable together, Ruth urged, and for the first time, she felt a spark of power igniting in Ellie. The little girl nodded, fear still lingering in her gaze, but determination flashing through. With a deep breath, Ruth shouted, "We are the light of our future. You cannot bind us with your darkness." The shadows shook, enraged by her proclamation, but Ruth pressed on. "You think you can instill fear in our hearts? No. We are the culmination of every story, every trial, every tear wept. You have lost your hold over us." The realization carved a path through her confusions. Facing the darkness didn't mean succumbing to it, but letting their history empower them. She turned to Ellie. "We need to remember their names. Let us call them out. Let us honor our women." With every name that fell from their lips, light burst forth, cascades of golden warmth seeping into the cold gloom. "Jane, Lily, Margot," they shouted together, the names echoing like an anthem against the oppressive weight of despair. The shadows shrieked, recoiling as if struck by the very force of light they emanated. But it wasn't enough. The darkness fought back furiously, and just as it lunged for them, a silhouette emerged from the chaos, the vengeful form of Ruth's cursed ancestor. "No!" Ruth cried out, stepping forward, shielding Ellie behind her as the specter advanced. "You are not us." The creature morphed, filling the air with malice. "You cannot defy your blood. You think this light will save you?" Ruth's resolve hardened. She faced the specter, trembling, yet unwavering. "I am here to end this cycle. We are not defined by your anguish." And with that, she summoned the energy of her family, every ounce of love, sacrifice, and pain. "You will listen now. You will hear our voices." The shadows roared, a fury unleashed. But Ruth stepped forward, no longer afraid. "You do not get to claim our stories. We will no longer let fear muffle our voices." Suddenly, clarity pierced the dark veil. Visions of her ancestors, women who had long been lost to despair, flickered back into life. She could see them. Their faces were distorted with agony and rage, yet illuminated with defiant glows. "Help us! Remember us!" they cried, creating a collective force that threw the shadows back. Together, Ellie shouted, and as she squeezed her mother's hand tightly, light erupted from their bond, a blazing warmth wrapping around them. The shadows howled in defiance, but it wasn't enough. In that moment, Ruth pulled Ellie into a fierce embrace. "We will break the chain, my sweet child. We channel their pain, but we are not bound to it. They want us to break free." With those words, they surged forward, the light exploding outward and engulfing the specters. The screams of agony drowning out the darkness as Ruth shouted, "Your time ends here. We choose our own paths. Our legacy will not define us." And then, in a blinding flash, the shadows shattered. The gust of light washed through them like a cleansing tide, obliterating the darkness that had long haunted their lineage. Every name they called, every story they embraced set a fire beneath the shadow's reach, illuminating pathways of hope through the tangled history and the aftermath. As the last remnants of the shadows dissipated, the room stood silent, eerily peaceful. Ruth blinked, momentarily blinded by the light, but as her vision cleared, she felt the weight lift from her chest. The burden of unclaimed stories no longer smothered them. "Mommy?" Ellie peeked up, wonder glimmering in her eyes. "Did we do it?" "Yes, my love," Ruth whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes. "We did it. We set them free and we freed ourselves." Around them, the walls softened, revealing glimpses of what could be a future painted with promise. Their families' voices whispered gently now, not in pain but in gratitude. With trembling hands, they walked forward into the light, leaving the remnants of the past behind. Together, they stepped into a new dawn. No longer bound, no longer cursed, as they embraced the world ahead. Ruth turned to Ellie, warmth flooding her chest. "We have a lifetime of stories to tell, but the most important one is ours." The sun painted the horizon bright as they stepped beyond the haunted echoes of their lineage, ready to carve their own legacy, one filled with light, hope, and love. But as they walked into their new beginning, An urgent pulse of realization gripped Ruth. This was only the start. They had persevered, but they would need to share their truth, the truth that had nearly consumed them. Ellie, Ruth said solemnly, let us promise to carry our story forward. We are conduits of change. And as Ellie nodded enthusiastically, Ruth took a deep breath, aware that their battle may have concluded here. But their fight for truth and strength was far from over. They would share their legacy, so that others would know the power of their choices, their voices. And with that promise, hand in hand, they ventured forth ready to prevent the darkness from ever swallowing anyone else whole. Now, listeners, this is where you come in. You need to subscribe now. Join our community and catch our next exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this jaw-dropping conclusion. And don't wait even one more second. Share this story with at least 5 friends who need to hear about courage and legacy. Your support matters, and only true fans know the importance of standing together through every twist and turn.